Let's take a little trip down memory lane to my time in Sydney, Australia. After spending 2 days in Bondi Beach, it was time to move over to Sydney Central and start my Sydney adventures. First up was Wendy's Secret Garden, which was a park on a hill overlooking the water and the Sydney Bridge. It was surprisingly desolate and it was a very fun find. I took in the view for a little bit before heading down to the water and walking towards the Sydney Bridge. It was a very serene walk and it led me to Luna Park, which is an amusement park chain in Australia. Unfortunately, Luna Park is seasonal, so it was closed at the time that I was there, but I was very tempted to go in if it had been open. I will say it was quite amusing to look at from the outside though. I would love to see what it's like in the summer when it is filled with people because I'm sure it's a very lively place. I spent quite a bit of time taking in the amusement park before hopping onto a ferry headed over to Sydney Harbour. Got on the ferry at perfect timing because the sun was setting so I could see the sunset behind me as we were boating away. Back on land, I started walking towards my hostel and found a restaurant attached to a Marriott where I decided to eat. I got some salad because I was in need of some vegetables. The restaurant seemed to be a really hot spot for people who had just gotten off of work. Everyone was drinking. It was very lively. And then I slowly made my way back to the hostel that I was staying at, which, fun fact, was a little bit of a nightmarish situation. I later escaped in this vlog, but I was there for 2 nights before I needed an out. On my second day, I had an almond croissant in a park before heading over to a cafe called Bow House to get a lot of tea since I wasn't feeling too well. I then took a bus to this place called Hermitage and walked the Hermitage path, which is basically along the water. There was a really nice beach on the path, but unfortunately I didn't bring my swimmies, so I just continued along the path. It was a really nice hike and you could also see the city in the distance. And then because I hadn't had enough of hiking, I decided to take another bus to Hornby's Lighthouse and do the hike up there. Before I got on the hike, I found this cute little coffee shack that was so Pinterest worthy and decided to get a chai latte. The chai latte wasn't great, but it was a little treat. There was also another nice beach there and I was really regretting that I hadn't brought in my swimmies with me. The lighthouse was under construction, so I just took in the view before heading back down to Watson Bay. I took the ferry back to Sydney Harbour, got a nice view of the Sydney Opera House, and then headed back to my hostel really quickly to get ready for my dinner plans. I headed right back over to Sydney Harbour because I was going to watch a ballet at the Sydney Opera House, but first I decided to have dinner at the Opera Bar. I had a lovely dinner and also a non-alcoholic espresso martini before heading into the Opera House for the ballet. The program was called Etudes by the Australian Ballet. It was such a cool experience being able to do this. The next day I had an art day. I started off at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney Harbour. I also passed by a little art fair on the way there and I actually picked up a couple of pieces that I brought back home with me. I then headed over to the Art Gallery of New South Wales and there was so much more to see at this museum. This was also the day that I switched hostels, so I ended up getting a private room in a really nice hostel. And I had dinner with some relatives, also not pictured. On my last day in Sydney, I hopped onto a ferry headed to Manly Beach. After a nice 30-minute ferry ride, I landed in Manly Island. I headed over to the beach before walking up and down the boardwalk and then finding a place to eat. I had dinner at the pantry, which was right on the beach and the perfect location. And it was really nice because I was seated right by the window, so I got to people watch while eating dinner. I watched the surfers in the water and I watched the sunset. It was quite literally the perfect way to end my time in Sydney and I felt so grateful in that moment. Well, that's all for now. See you in my next destination. Bye!